Hi, Arjava. I'm very happy that we meet again to discuss more of the Reiki history and of our participation in it, and how you met Chiyoko Yamaguchi from the Yamaguchi family, who is foundation of today's Jikiden Reiki, isn't it?
Yes. Okay. Hi, Walter. Happy to see you. Happy to be your neighbor again. It's really, the technology is really cool. Yeah? We can just get together and talk, yeah? And see each other and then share it with lots of other friends. Great.
And Lesbos background.
So, okay. I'm really a storyteller, as you know. Huh?
Oh, yes, I do. You're doing great.
So all my life, everything that's happening in my life has one or two stories attached to it. So you asked me how I met Chiyoko Yamaguchi or Gioco Sensei. So I'm going to start somewhere else again and hopefully come to the point in time, okay? So doing research in Japan is really hard work.
I guess so.
And one of the reasons, obviously, are the kanji, the Chinese characters that you need to know to be able to research something. But the other thing is that one of the basic building compounds of Japanese culture is trust.
Mm-hmm.
And trust takes time. Now, once you have that trust, you're good for life. I mean, in our German culture is the same. Mm-hmm. But in Germany, we are faster with this. In Japan, that takes years. So in the summer of 1995, I mentioned earlier that my student, Shizuko Akimoto, met somebody from the Usui Association, one of the 5 or 6 teachers that they had at the time, Mr. Ogawa. Mm-hmm. And she then spent the next almost 3 years visiting him every few months, and he started sharing with her how they do Reiki. She started sharing with him how we do Reiki. And this way things evolved. And before he died, he gave me some documents, one which was his memoirs, and another one was the Usui handbook, the original Usui handbook, and teaching manual of the then president, mm-hmm. Kumar Sensei. Mm-hmm. And we were kind of getting ready for me to go and meet him. And it took time. We were thinking slowly, slowly, and then I go and meet him. And just when we were getting ready, he died.
Oh, gosh.
He passed away. Yeah? So, okay, he was 93.
93, wow, that's the ripe age.
Yeah. So he passed away in, I don't remember it exactly, either was the end of 98 or the beginning of 99, and just about the same time, within a month or two, Koyama Sensei from the Usui Association also passed away. She was also that age, mm-hmm. somewhere in the 90s. And the door that had opened to the Usui Association somewhat, just a little crack, closed. And I was sitting there thinking like, what am I going to do now? Will I ever be able to fulfill my dream to actually do training with the traditional Japanese Reiki teacher? It didn't look mm-hmm. like it would be possible, because the moment they heard that I was a foreigner, usually, Tom, I ate the door in my face. So,
Arjava, is it still this generation, let's say the millennials and so, are they still that way? Or is it, let's say, the generation of the Uzui Gakkai, the 70, 80, 90-year-old people who are like that? Is modern Japan the same?
It must be changing now. I don't really know. I do go every year now, but due to the technology and the interconnectedness of the whole world, technically speaking, I think it's changing somewhat. Mm-hmm. But I remember, for example, many years ago, before I left Japan, so 20 years ago, I saw an interview with one of the Japanese telecoms managers. And at that time, the Japanese telecom was using a different system from everybody else in the world, which meant that you couldn't use your phone if you were from abroad in Japan. Wouldn't work.
Oh gosh.
Yeah. And they asked this guy on TV, on national TV, they asked him, are you considering to change that? To help the foreigners be able to use their telephones while in Japan. He just looked straight in the camera. He said, never. I was like, I couldn't believe it, but they have this island mentality like in the UK.
Well, yeah.
More intense, much more intense. So they believe around them is only water. Yeah, there are no neighbors, and Japan is kind of the center of the universe. Yeah?
I remember that when I visited Japan the first time, I think it was 2000 or 99 something. I tried to get money from a cash machine, a credit card cash machine, and they didn't accept my card. And I had I think 4 cards, different Visa, MasterCard, whatever. Nothing worked. And
I remember
did
that.
not have an English menu. So I thought, what the heck is going on here? Then I asked people in the hotel and in shops and so on. And then I got one place in the whole city of Tokyo, one place only, where you could get cash money from the diner's office. That was the only place in a world city with, I don't know, 15 million people or whatever, internationally renowned, but they did not accept credit cards. And the explanation of everybody Japanese I asked was, well, this is not trustable, these credit cards from abroad, who knows whether we will be paid when we accept them and so on,
Yeah, I remember. I also remember on that trip when we met was in 99.
99, yeah.
You had just written a book on tea. Yeah, and you were in the hotel and you were trying to order green tea, and they said they didn't have any.
That was something which really puzzled me. You're getting into the land of green tea and there is no green tea.
Funny. So I don't know if things are changing now. I think so, and I hope so, because you cannot survive as a small island in the middle of nothing.
Well, yeah.
So, but it has a cultural background from as far as I understand, which is this: in medieval times, all of Japan was divided into small kingdoms and dukedoms, and the only way that they could guarantee safety for their people was by forming very coherent, closed groups. Yeah? The in-group.
Like tribes.
The in-group and the out-group. In Japanese, it's called uchi. Uchi also means home or we. Yeah? And soto means outside, but also means them. Yeah? So it's us and them. Yeah? And you find that everywhere. The smallest example of that, obviously, is the family. Yeah? Either you are part of the family or not. That's it.
Yeah.
And then it's the school. And in the school, it's the school class. So what happens in the school class stays in the school class, and you don't talk about it outside. And that continues in the company later on, or in the tennis club, or in the English school. Yeah? So it's always whatever happens in the group.
Is uchi.
How do they say? Whatever happens in New York stays in New York. Yeah? Same thing. Yeah? So it's not because they don't like foreigners. Yeah? It's in Japanese culture. It's the same.
Yeah.
So I thought, okay, now this door is closed for the Usui Association, and I might not be able to ever learn traditional Reiki. So I thought, okay, I just go on my way and do what I do it the best way I can. and what to do. Yeah, so I gave up.
Mhm.
And as we know too well, when you give up very often,
Yeah,
suddenly things start to move. Huh? Because
they
I
do.
guess the tension is gone and then you're relaxed. Huh?
Yeah.
So one day, one of my students called me and said, "Hey, I just found a book by a Japanese Reiki teacher who was a student of one of my early students. His name was Mr. Aoki.
Mhm.
He wrote a book, and in it, there's a really interesting interview with a Japanese grandmother who
Mhm.
lives in Kyoto, and she's a student of Hayashi Sensei." And I'm like, what? We have never heard of any of Hayashi's students in Japan until then. So we're now in 1999,
Mhm.
somewhere in the summer, autumn, something like that. Yeah? So I thought, wow, student of Hayashi Sensei, teaching in Kyoto. That's interesting. I love Kyoto, so it'll be another good excuse to go
A
and
beautiful city.
visit. Let's see if I can find out who she is. So I said to the guy, my friend, yeah, okay, I'm going to get a copy of it. He said, no, no, I will send you one. I've already bought one for you. He sent it, and then my former wife translated the interview with Gioco Sensei, and I thought, okay, now let's see
Mhm.
if we can figure out who it is, because her name was not mentioned.
Mhm. Mhm.
So the first person I called was one of my old students, Toshitaka Mochizuki, who has also done some books on Reiki and has a big Reiki school in Tokyo called Vortex.
Mhm.
So I called him. I said, hey, I just read that book by Aoki Sensei, and he talks about this lady there. Do you know who it is? He says, no, I don't know, but Hiroshi Doi knows.
Mhm.
Why don't you call him? So I called Hiroshi, and he said, yeah, yeah, I know her. I've been visiting her. I'll give you the number. So I called and then talked to Gioco Sensei's son, Tadao Yamaguchi. But because I had these bad experiences being a foreigner, I thought, oh, okay, I'm not going to call her myself. So I put my former wife to do it. I said, please, can you call her? And so they talked together, Tadao Sensei and her talked together. And she said, oh, we read the book about your mom teaching traditional Reiki, and is it true? Are you teaching? And Tadao said, yes, we're teaching here in Kyoto. And yeah, would you like to come and learn? Yes, we would like to come. But my husband is foreigner. Yeah, I was listening on the speakerphone, and I thought, okay, now the door will come. Eh? And Tadao totally surprised me by saying, does he speak Japanese? She said, yes. He said, so what's the problem? I was like,
Wow.
what? I couldn't believe it. I never thought it would be possible. Huh? And
Mhm.
then they told us right away on the phone that if you want to come, you can come. We have the first group. We started an institute. We have the first group in early 2000,
Mhm.
but that's already fully booked. And you can come to the next one, but please know that you can do only, you can learn from her only Shoden and Okuden. Shoden is the beginner
Mhm.
course. In Western Reiki, we would call it Reiki 1, and Okuden is Reiki 2, or the middle degree, or the deep insight, deeper knowledge.
Mhm.
You can only do that, nothing more. And if you are ready to do that, then come. And at this point, I was just so thrilled to learn Reiki for myself
Mhm.
again, yeah,
Mhm.
from a different perspective.
Mhm.
I didn't have any idea that, oh, I'm going to teach that afterwards and do this and that and that. And Nothing at all. I just did it for myself. I was so thrilled.
Mm.
Yeah, so I, being of a curious nature, I asked, and oh, really? Your first workshop's already fully booked? How many people have you got?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm thinking, she would say, yeah, that's already 50 people and we can't fit anybody else. He said 6.
Wow.
And I'm like, 6? And when is the next group? He said, in 7 months.
Mm.
So I'm sitting there thinking, like, oh boy, they're teaching 6 people twice a year. It's not very busy. Yeah? And later on, I found out that when Gioco Sensei started to teach, that she didn't think that there was a future in that thing
Ah,
at
I see.
all. Yeah, she just, okay, I will tell you how it happened. She studied Reiki in the 1930s because her uncle was Hayashi Sensei's, or one of Hayashi Sensei's organizers.
Mm-hmm.
So she grew up already with Reiki. When she was 7, they were doing the Reiki workshops in their house
Mm-hmm.
with Hayashi Sensei. And then the war came afterwards and Reiki went down. We discussed it
Yeah,
earlier.
yeah.
And then after the war, she realized that now healing is against the law in Japan, couldn't be done in public. So she just did it by word of mouth at home,
Mm-hmm.
every day, in the family, with the neighbors, with friends. And then in the 90s, her son, Tadao, went to some environmental meetings in Japan. And obviously, in this kind of group, there were lots of people who were doing spiritual things.
Mm-hmm.
And the Japanese, when they meet somebody for the first time, maybe they don't exchange business cards, but the next time
Mm-hmm.
they go, oh, we've seen each other before. Here, this is my card. And then he got some cards that said Mr. So-and-so Reiki master or Reiki teacher or something like that, Reiki Sensei.
Mm-hmm.
And he looked at it first and he thought, I wonder if that's the same thing that we do at home. But why they write it in a phonetic way or in Roman letters? Why they don't use the kanji? How strange. Huh? And then that happened repeatedly again and again. And one day he outed himself to somebody and said, well, I actually do the same thing. And the other asked him, where did you learn? He said, oh, I learned from my mom.
Mm.
And which seminar did your mom go to? And she said she didn't go to a seminar. She learned from Hayashi Sensei. And then the other, who was knowledgeable about Reiki history, said, you don't mean Chujiro Hayashi Sensei, the Hayashi Sensei? And to which Tadao Sensei answered, I don't know. I don't know his first name. I will check with my mom. So he went home and asked his mom, hey, mom, was he called Chujiro? Because in their house, they only called him Sensei. And his family name. You wouldn't know even the teacher's first name. It's too
Personal.
too personal. Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So she said, yes, his name was Chujiro Hayashi. And then Tadao Sensei went out and bought a book in a bookshop on Reiki. He couldn't believe that there were books on Reiki. He brought it home, showed it to his mom, and she said, yeah, that's more or less, that's the same thing. That's what we do at home. And then the teacher of the guy who Tadao had outed himself to, that he too does Reiki, heard about the conversation, called Tadao and said, I want to meet your mom as soon as possible. So he came from Tokyo to talk to Gioco Sensei, brought his secretary and a tape recorder and took some photographs, and then went home happily. And after about 6 months, he called her back and said, "Oh, Sensei, thank you so much for meeting me the other day. It was so delightful. And by the way, our interview will be published in my upcoming book."
What?
And she was like, "Excuse me, you're not asking me my permission. You're not letting me read that first. Don't mention my name." And the guy said, "Oh, yeah, I understand, but that's too bad. Thank you very much. Goodbye." And then he published his book, and it didn't have her name in it.
Mm.
Okay,
Mm-hmm.
so this is how it all started. Yeah? So even though it wasn't really in agreement with her,
Mm-hmm.
because he did what he did, she
Mm.
became known. Otherwise, we would never know about her. Yeah?
Wow.
So in the end, it was good. Yeah?
What a chain of coincidences.
It's
You know,
Reiki is full of it.
wow.
Yeah, and another, since we're talking about these coincidences, another one that always blows me away is this. Yeah?
Mm-hmm.
Imagine, after World War II, Reiki became kind of illegal
Mm-hmm.
in Japan. Yeah? So you couldn't practice it in public. And that was due to the US occupational forces who changed the laws in Japan. So basically, the Americans illegalized
Mm-hmm.
Reiki. Now, what happens next? Hayashi Sensei goes to Hawaii and Reiki survives in the US.
Yeah.
Yeah, and if Takata Sensei hadn't done what she did, we wouldn't be talking together.
Right, right, right.
Yeah, that's another. I find it so weird. What a coincidence. Yeah,
Yeah.
they
Also, the
pushed
way
it.
we met, with these roundtable discussion, which never took place, and several other people being involved. It's a Reiki way of promoting things.
Yeah, you push it down in one place and it pops up in another, yeah? Like a beach ball. So after I talked to Tadao Sensei on the phone, we made an appointment because the first group was fully booked, 6 people. I had to go to the second one. And when I heard that it was 7 or 8 months later, I was like, oh my, like a kid waiting for Christmas. Anyway, we went to Kyoto, and I was very, very curious and had lots of questions. So before we started, I took Tadao Sensei by the side and said, look, I'm a foreigner and I'm very inquisitive. I've been doing Reiki for a long time and I have lots of questions. I don't want to be rude or seem rude because Japanese people don't really ask the teacher anything. Yeah?
Mm-hmm.
We just sit there like this and say, I, yes, yes. So he said, no, no, it's okay. I will tell her. It's okay. Just quiz her. You just ask whatever you want to ask. And my main issue was really what I wanted to see what happens to somebody who's been practicing Reiki for a long time. What happens to their personality, to their character, to their how are they? Yeah? Because I had met some Reiki teachers, some well-known Reiki teachers. They were arrogant, and I thought, that can't be. If that's what it does, I'm not
Then forget it.
interested. Yeah?
Right. Same with me.
Yeah, so I wanted to meet like a Reiki adult, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
Somebody who had already grown into it fully. And
Yeah.
she was a very good example of that. She was unpretentious, normal. It's not a guru type or anything. Sometimes you asked her a question and she said, well, I have to think about that. Huh?
Mm-hmm.
So it was very nice, very sweet. And I think all people that had done trainings with her will answer more or less in the same way. If you ask them, how was it with
Yeah.
her? And they will all say, it was like having tea with grandma.
Yeah. Yeah. That was my impression too. And she was a really likable character, a down-to-earth character who was really interested in Reiki as a healing art. There are these in my understanding, very weird ideas which came up some years ago. Reiki is not meant for healing, it's meant for personality development only. And there is no definition of what this personality development would be, because they say it's everybody's personal thing, and you don't discuss it, you don't ask something, you don't tell something. So this is for me weird. It's not grounded. When I look at what I know about Hayashi, about Takata, and about Chiyoko Yamaguchi and Tadao, they are very down to earth characters. They want to do something good in real life. So
Yes.
that fascinated me with Chiyoko from the beginning. She was just a human being, and you could be relaxed around her.
Yeah, so I remember when I went to Kyoto, we did the workshop in her house, or in the house that they used to live in for many, many years, which was then used as a stationery store, which was their family business.
Okay.
Yeah, so they had the stationery store downstairs at the ground level, and they were staying upstairs and in the back. Meanwhile, they had moved out, but they kept the place for their business. Yeah, so we did it there, and I loved it because it was an old Kyoto townhouse, about 120 years old, and from the front it looked like a small house, but it was huge. Yeah, maybe 300 square meters or something.
Wow, that's
And,
massive for Japanese.
and yeah,
Wow,
and
that's big.
with a small garden in it, very beautiful, and full of like antique Japanese furniture that I like very much, like from the Meiji period and before. Really, really nice. And we were there with 6 people, and I saw why they didn't take more, because that room was full. There was no room for anybody else. Yeah? So we spent those first 5 days there. And I remember the first leiju I got. The leiju is the Japanese word for what we call attunement. They were doing it in the dark, in the complete dark. They had these thick, like velvety kind of curtains. They turned all the lights off. They closed the curtains. You couldn't see your hand in front of your face.
Very mystical.
Very mystical. I was like, whoa, what is this? And then I was trying not to figure out what they are doing, because I was already a teacher, and I thought, no, I'm sitting here for myself. We were sitting on our knees like this, in Gasho, and then they touched you, and before they touched me, through my closed eyes in the dark, I could see them coming as like out, I could suddenly see their aura. I was like, what the hell? Because I'm usually not like this at all. I'm not visual. I don't see things, I'm very, very simple-minded, but I could see them coming, and I'm thinking, oh my God, what is this? And then during the leiju, I thought it was not very spectacular, more simple than our attunement rituals, which I don't want to discuss here. More simple, and then suddenly they said, okay, that's it. They turned the light back on, and I thought, oh, that was simple. And suddenly I realized I was in a very, very nice inner state where there was contentment, and there was no impulse to do anything, not even to get up. And then I realized, oh, this is it. Nice. Yeah, when everything is just right and just beautiful as it is, you don't have to change anything, you don't have to think, you don't have to do anything, you don't have to rush up and occupy yourself, but you're just sitting there and, oh, beautiful. Yeah? So this was the kind of the beginning. And then the teaching was quite different. But what really did it for me, what changed my life and also my Reiki practice, was her introduction of the concept of Byosen.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so Byosen, Byo means sick or ill, and Sen means accumulation or blockage or line, like a line on paper. Yeah? So all in all, that means the blockage in and around the blood and lymph vessels are the origin of illness.
Mm-hmm.
And this, she said, this is how Hayashi Sensei used to explain it. And the system that she taught us, it was just fantastic, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
Incredible. And these were all things that I kind of knew before,
Mm-hmm.
had felt before, but I didn't know there was a system. Yeah? And until
Yes.
then, I
Yes.
thought that Western Reiki is systematic and let's say scientific, and Japanese Reiki is intuitive, and I realized it's actually the other way around.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's science, and this I loved. Yeah, I had heard about the Byosen from Ogawa Sensei, but not in detail. Yeah?
Mm-hmm.
And now learning it was really great. It changed my life, and it's still really, really interesting after 20 years that every time I treat somebody, I'm listening to their healing process. Yeah? And that's amazing. There's nothing like it. Yeah? I love that. Yeah?
It's so important to develop the ability of the hands to sense the energy,
Yes, yes, yes.
because then you can really read the energetic field of the person, which gives you our equivalent, in my understanding, of a medical diagnosis. We are now medical doctors usually, and this is not a medical diagnosis as such. It's a spiritual diagnosis. And when I wrote my first book, the Reiki Handbook, I wrote about this, but I did not know about Byosen. It was like with you. I had the experience that
Yes, yes, yes.
feel these things, that first it's heat, then it comes prickling, and then it comes pain. And the strongest one in my experience is if the hands are cold and painful, then I ask people to visit a medical professional. But I had no idea that in Japan they knew about it, they had words for it, they had a system around it. So that was so genial when you came up with this and said, well, yeah, the Yamaguchis, they told me, and I thought, wow, finally,
Yeah, 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 yeah. That was great. Yeah?
yeah.
So I loved the work with her, and I remember, of course, some of my questions. So first of all, I asked her historical things that she must know. Takata Sensei, who was the successor of Hayashi Sensei, she looked at me like this. She said, Mrs. Hayashi was the successor of Hayashi Sensei. And I was like, who is Mrs. Hayashi? Never heard of her. Yeah, I hadn't until then.
Yeah.
So a lot of myths died there, but also practical issues. Yeah? The principles were different. Yeah, very simple. And then she talked about what Reiki meant for her. She said Reiki is like compassion in action, applied love. Yeah?
Mhm.
And I was like, yes, yes, finally. It's not this ego-centered thing of changing of the personality for you. Huh? It's
Yeah.
not like that. You're sharing your love with everybody. Huh?
Yeah.
Of course, the prerequisite is that something must have happened to you first before you can share something. Huh? Of course, it's true. Huh? But the purpose really is the other. The purpose is the sharing of the love. Huh? The purpose, not the personality changes. Japanese is a Buddhist. Japan is a Buddhist country.
Yeah.
So in Buddhism, they don't believe in the ego,
Mhm.
which is what we're talking about when I say, oh, I develop my character. What is that? It's ego.
Mhm, mhm.
Yeah, it's not about that. They say the ego is the only thing that doesn't exist. Yeah, so why would you polish that? The thing that doesn't exist doesn't make sense. Yeah? And I think the first or the second day I was there with Chiyoko Sensei, we were doing an exercise. After the Leiju, we were sitting in a circle and putting our hands on the shoulders of the person in front of us. And I happened to sit, we were only 8 people, yeah, 6 or 7, 5, I think 5 participants, and Tadao Sensei and Gioco Sensei.
Mhm,
So I happened to sit behind her,
mhm,
and afterwards she said, "Oh, I can tell that you've been doing it for such a long time. Your hands are so nice and warm, and wow, that was so nice. Thank you." And, I she wasn't polishing my ego. You
No.
know, old people often don't do that anymore. You know, they learned their lesson. So she was just saying what it is, and I realized that, and I realized in that instant that whatever Reiki you do, and you do it fully and from your heart, it's beautiful.
Mhm, mhm,
Yeah, and she did not think that I know better than you or anything. Not at all. Yeah? She just acknowledged the work in me, and immediately I thought of all these millions of people who are practicing beautifully everywhere. Yeah? So guys, this is for you. What you do is beautiful. It has no label on it, and no one Reiki is better than somebody else's. Yeah?
mhm.
So this really moved me. Another situation that was really funny is that she was so down to earth. Yeah? So a lot of the techniques that we use for Reiki, they don't do.
Mhm,
It's very, very simple. And the explanation that I was given for that simplicity is interesting. Yeah? So when Usui Sensei gave the name to his technique, he didn't just call it Reiki.
mhm,
He called it Shin Shin Kaizen Usui Reiki Ryoho.
mhm,
Yeah? Shin Shin Kaizen means, the first Shin means heart, and heart for the Japanese is heart and mind together, the unity, kokoro. Yeah?
Kokoro, yeah. Mhm.
Yes. And the second Shin, strangely enough, is the physical body.
Ah, okay.
Yeah? And Kaizen is something you may know from your business background, means improvement. They
Mhm,
use that in business also. So for the improvement of heart, mind, and body,
body. Mhm,
Usui Reiki Soul Energy
mhm,
Yoho healing method.
mhm,
Yeah, so this was the name that was given to Reiki, and actually the full name of the Usui Association is the Shin Shin Kaizen Usui Reiki Yoho Gakkai.
mhm,
Yeah,
mhm.
that's their name. So, and they trademarked that
Wow.
term, yeah, because it's their name.
Mhm, mhm,
They're not doing it to sue anybody, but to keep themselves out of trouble.
mhm,
So anyway, from this you can really see what Usui Sensei had in mind. Yeah? He wanted to work on the body, obvious with all our treatments, but he also wanted to work on heart and mind, because he said first, obviously, you have to start here. The healing starts here. As long as the mind is not healed, there's
the body
nothing
cannot.
the body cannot follow.
First heal the mind. That is a very interesting perspective at Java, because one of the things which I've heard also in the Reiki community during the last years is that Uzui originally meant Reiki to be something to develop so-called spiritual talents like clairvoyance and so on. And I always doubt that because his approach always appeared to me very down to earth, that he wanted people to have a good life, that to be in their heart, to be compassionate, but not that it's about developing kind of pseudo spiritual talents. That was so much not him, as far as I understood him.
Yeah, and I share your opinion totally with this. Like this spiritual, like in India they call them siddhis, yeah, spiritual
Yes.
powers. So they may appear in
Mhm.
your life
Well,
on and off. Yeah, they appear for a while and then maybe they disappear, but they are just a side effect.
exactly. And like it's written in the book, The Roots of Yoga by Patanjali, they are a kind of challenge, which is for the ego, because if you think, oh, because I'm clairvoyant, I'm better, whatever, more spiritual than the other people are, that is a trap. It's just a trap because it's just an ability. Like we can play piano, it doesn't mean that we are more spiritual.
Yes, and you know what I noticed in my own development
Yes.
is that these things appear and then they disappear. Yeah,
Well,
and this is great, yeah, because maybe you need them for some time. When I met my wife,
mm.
we both instantly developed the ability to astro travel. This sounds like it out of a fantasy movie, yeah?
Yeah.
And that worked in the beginning when we were not together,
Mhm.
and then it worked for a little while later, but then it stopped. Yeah? We can't do it anymore. It had a purpose, yeah?
Mhm.
To glue us together, yeah? And then it stopped. Yeah? So these powers, they come and go, and you must let them go because it's finished. Yeah? It's over. Don't hold on to it, yeah? And don't think that that is something great or special or spiritual. That's just, like Patanjali says, most of the time a trap. Huh? And developing, let's say, your psychic abilities is not a healthy thing. Let that happen by itself, and give it time, give it space. And if it happens, okay. And if not, you're better off. You're better off not feeling so much.
It's a tricky thing because if people overdo it and they don't have a very grounded approach to it, they easily get into a very chaotic mindset. It's happened so often that people try to force that, and they don't know exactly what to do, and they consider this being the goal of spiritual exercises, and then they just hear 24/7 lots of things around them, and that's no good, that it's not healthy, you got just get into a chaotic state of energy inside of yourself. So I think it's important to understand that the goal is always the development of the spiritual self, and not a specific ability that might come or might not come, but you are not a better person because you have a certain talent.
Yeah, right. So I think our idea
Yeah,
is that we always think in terms of having something or gaining something
yeah.
or gaining more.
Mhm.
Yeah, so somewhere deep down, we believe that the way I am is not good enough,
Mhm.
and I need to develop, I need to get more, so I'm worthy. And that's all a bunch of garbage. Yeah?
Yeah.
So self development, in my opinion, is rather the other way around. You become more simple and more simple and more simple. And
Yeah.
it's more like peeling an onion, yeah? Peeling off layers that you realize, I'm not you. This is not you. None of it is you. Yeah? It's society speaking through you, your conditioning, your parents, your culture, your language, your religion. None of it is you. So keep peeling layer by layer off
Mhm.
until you end up with maybe nothing. That is spirituality. Spirituality is not Disneyland, yeah, having these great powers and doing magic, and that's
throwing
great.
around energies and
Yeah.
beaming. But sometimes, sometimes I would love to be able to beam somewhere, to beam at the Kurama Mountain or something, or to a wonderful Lesbos island where you live, that would be nice, but I understand if people would do that, then we would have very crowded places and maybe they would be stapled one above the other, not good.
So let's go back to the meeting with Chiyoko Sensei. So I told you we were in her house, in this traditional Japanese house, great atmosphere. The initiations, the leiju was given in the dark. Then we practiced every day.
Mm-hmm.
And on one of the days was my time to receive a treatment.
Mm-hmm.
And the way that she used to say was that the most experienced practitioner goes to the head.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, if you're doing a group treatment. So she was sitting behind me. I was laying on a low Japanese table with a futon, a cotton mattress on the top of it. They didn't have a massage table at the time. And she was treating me, I have this psoriasis since I'm 10 years old, and she saw it in the back of my head here. And then she started suddenly massaging my shoulders. And she said, oh, we must increase the blood circulation here. Then, look, it's already getting better. And she was going like, wow, wow, wow. And I still remember her hands, the touch of her hands.
So she did also combine Reiki with massage, simple massage method like Usui did. And
right. And she said that from her 65-year experience, it's best if you massage the body first and then Reiki it.
Makes sense.
I also think that's a really good way. And then when we were working with her, she would suddenly just grab your hand and say, put your hand here, and put it on one body part of the client and say, do you feel how that is pulsing here, or how it's tingling? Or that's how we learned about Byosen with her. And in the evenings, we always went out for a drink together to have some sake or a glass of beer. It wasn't holy atmosphere at all.
Yeah.
That I also liked. There were no rules. There was no, there was structure, but
Sure.
there were no rules, and there was no hierarchy, no arrogance, no looking up to her or anything.
Like that sometimes in the Western world, Reiki teachers don't want to sit together with the students or these kind of things,
Terrible.
It's terrible. It's a shame.
I cannot believe it. So she was very amicable, very friendly, very sweet. And sometimes she said, oh, when we asked her something, oh, I don't know. And that too I liked. Or she said, you think too much. But it wasn't like complaint or so. It was just, hey, why you make your life so miserable?
Friendly remark.
With the thinking.
Yeah.
So this is what she very often said. She said, look, Reiki is the most simple thing in the world. And it goes like this. So you put your hand and it goes on. And then you go like this, it's off. This is the switch. On, off. Yeah, and stop thinking so much. Don't make it so complicated. Then in the Okuden days, the second degree, we were talking about the symbols, and Tadao Sensei was drawing them on a board, and I'm going like, oh. And she says, oh, I hear you're also using these in your Reiki practice. I says, yes. And she says, and she looked a little bit mischievous, and she said, and you're always saying it 3 times, right? I said, yes. when thinking, yes, we know how to do it. And then she picked up a spoon and she said, well, you know, if you pick up the spoon, you don't have to say spoon, spoon, spoon. We were all laughing. And it took a while to realize what it meant that she said.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe I can explain that here quickly. In Japanese culture, they have three different concepts that they consider in their spiritual healing.
Mm-hmm.
One of them is kotodama.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, kotodama, koto means word, dama is soul. Yeah, so it means something like a mantra. It's not a mantra, but something like it, where the power of the thing is in the sound,
Mm-hmm.
but not in the writing.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so when you hear it like a mantra or an incantation, boom, yeah,
Mm-hmm.
it does something to you. The other one is shilushi. Shilushi means symbol.
Mm-hmm.
And the power of the symbol is in the shape. So,
Mm-hmm.
for example, a stop sign would be something like that. When you come to the stop sign, you don't have to say to yourself, stop, 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 look left and look right, and only then you can go. You just stop. Huh? So the power is in the geometric shape, but not in the sound. And then they have another concept that's called Jumon, and Jumon is like a magic formula, and that's a mix of both, yeah?
Mm-hmm.
Of both in a way, Kotodama and Shilushi, and there you write it and you say it at the same time. And we realized that a few years later that in our Western Reiki tradition, we mixed up these concepts a little bit and treating everything as if it were Jumon. You
Yeah, like they do in India, that they use mantra and yantra, meaning the words and the symbol
know?
together. Mhm.
Same.
But
Yeah,
didn't you tell me once, that's a long time ago, that you met, I think it was in Tokyo, someone who did Reiki, who gave initiation by singing something or treating by singing something?
yeah.
Is it right? Do I remember right?
Yeah, you remember correctly. Now I just don't remember exactly, but it was true. It was somebody who had learned from um, another Japanese,
Mhm.
whose teacher was in the Usui Association. So I guess it was somebody who deviated to left the Usui Association, and they used to sing something, but now I don't remember
Was
what
it
it
the
was.
Wakas, the Meiji,
I think
poem?
so, but you know what? I have to look that up.
Yeah, that would be
I,
interesting.
I know I have written it down. I
I
know.
do a lot with singing, I combine overtone singing
Uh,
with Reiki. When people don't open up to the energy, I have great results just singing the overtones to a part of the body for a while and then placing the hands on there and energy goes.
yeah, sound is vibration, no? It's the
Yeah,
same.
yes,
Yeah,
it
it's
is.
touch.
Mhm. But I think it's also we won't discuss this in detail, but that the let's say classical Japanese way of initiating does not combine the words with the symbols, but in Western world they do.
Yeah,
Mm.
yeah. This is one of the differences. Huh?
Yeah.
And we find that not only in the initiation, but also in the work, obviously, in the hands-on work. Yeah, that in our Western Reiki traditions, we mixed up lots of things together. Yeah, in the Japanese, it's more separate. Yeah, you do this for this, you do this for that, but you don't mix them all
Mhm.
together to make all the gods happy. Yeah? So it's more simple, yeah? And that suits me. Yeah, I know you have a more complex brain than me.
Sometimes I do. Sometimes I think it's too complicated for me to think about all these things.
Yeah, I am very simple-minded, really. I mean, super simple, you know. So her teaching was simple. That suited me
Mm.
very well. And I went home totally thrilled after a week. We had 5 days of training, and then after a week I went home. We got a beautiful Japanese certificate. I was so
Wow.
thrilled, and I thought that was it. Yeah?
Yeah.
That was as far as I can go. And at the time, I thought, okay, maybe I don't see her again
Mm. Mm.
because I've learned what I can learn. I didn't realize that in the Japanese tradition, they have this system of repeating again and again,
Mm.
coming to see
Mm.
your teacher again and again. I didn't realize that.
Like you do with Zen and martial arts.
The same,
Hmm.
same. Yeah? But it, in the next year or so, I realized that. Yeah?
Mm.
So before I left, I told her that I really enjoyed meeting a Reiki adult, yeah? And that I thought there would be a lot of people who would really benefit from her presence, and if she would come to Germany to teach.
Mm.
And she said, yes, I'll come. And then I asked her to do a book with me. And in the back of my head, I was thinking of you, eh? Because you had put me on the Reiki map
Hmm.
in 96, 97. And somehow I had the feeling now I want to do the same for somebody else. Eh? I want to pass that gift on to somebody else. So I said to her, how about we do a book together and we talk about your family history and all that. And then afterwards, you do whatever you want. It's not a marriage,
Hmm.
yeah, between us that you have to do and you have to do with me, or there are no strings attached. I just know that if you continue like this, 6 people twice a year, this thing is not going to take off.
No.
And we can use my, let's say, my muscle in
Mm.
the international Reiki community to put you on the map. And then when you once you're on the map, people will come to you
Right.
and things will grow. And she liked that idea.
Hmm.
And we decided that we're going to do it. A few months later, Tadao Sensei called me and said, you know, we talked to the family and they don't want it. Her brothers and sisters, they don't want the name out in public. And
Wow.
sorry, I have to refuse you. Then again, a few years later, we did it, and that was the Hayashi Haiku.
Hmm. Hmm.
Yeah, maybe we talk more about that part of the story some other time. Otherwise we get too scattered. Huh?
That's
So
right. Yeah.
I really enjoyed meeting her. It was like love at first sight. Huh? She was so sweet and
So she was a very open-minded and liberal character.
strange, huh? Because Kyoto is the snob capital of Japan. Yeah, they think that they are Japanese culture and better than everybody else. And
Mm-hmm.
they're usually more conservative. Yeah? At the time, this was in 2000, if you walked as a foreigner on the sidewalk and somebody was coming towards you, yeah,
Hmm.
before they would meet you, they would go on the other side. Yeah,
Oh,
just going like, oof, no, I want to see this guy.
so too.
Mm. So
So she was well rooted in the Japanese culture, but on the same time, she was very open-minded and unusually open-minded for Japanese.
yeah, and I am sure. I mean, I can't find any other reason for that other than that she grew up with Reiki
Mhm.
from when she was little, yeah? Because that was so unusual. She
But
was
could you
open
also,
with,
please go on.
she was so open. We asked her if we could give her a hug, and she says, "Yes, come." And it was like, what? What is this?
That's unusual
Very,
for Japanese.
yeah, totally unusual. Yeah, and it was just nice being with her, and she had no reservations with the foreigners, as far as I could see,
Yeah.
at all. Yeah, as long as you could speak, of course, to her, or there was somebody who could translate, that was totally fine. Yeah?
As far as I remember, I guess you told me that she was also involved during decades in organic food and kind of holistic lifestyle, which in my understanding also is not the classic Japanese way of this generation. So she was always someone who wanted to have a broader view of life, isn't it?
Absolutely, and she did the same thing that we do now. Yeah,
Mm.
I know it from you. I know it from other people. That, for example, when you hear about some beautiful healing technique, maybe if it interests you, you go check it out. You learn it.
Right.
My wife and I recently did a craniosacral therapy
Oh,
training.
wonderful.
It was so nice.
Really
I
good.
loved it. It was
Mm.
so nice. And she did the same.
Hmm.
Yeah. Plus, then when you're into all of these things, maybe you get into eating organic food, or eating a good diet, or
Mm.
having these kind of new habits. Yeah? So she was the same, just like us. Same
Mm.
thing. Yeah? And that opens up your mind. It makes you more flexible and more all, in a way, all embracing. Yeah?
I remember when you invited us to Kyoto when we met, and I had my students with me and so on. She also was very open in explaining about Kyoto and telling us about beautiful sights, and she also was just discussing what we do, what she was doing with the with the hands sensing the energy. And she told me that if you are able to have your hands at as wide away from each other as your shoulders are, you still sense the energy, then that's a good healing capacity, these kind of things. And I thought, wow, she's open-minded. She's not, you know.
Yeah, yeah. I really enjoyed meeting her. It was, as I said, was love at first sight, and I kept in touch with her over the next few months,
Yeah.
and then all the way until she died in 2003. Yeah? So for me, that was a life-changing event.
Yeah, for me too. That was great, and thank you again for making this possible, that I could come to Kyoto and take these classes. That was a dream come true for me.
Yeah, that was my. Well, I thought, what can I do for you, because you helped me so much with the publishing. Yeah, when I came back from Kyoto from Gioco Sensei seminar, I was thinking of you, and I was feeling so grateful that you had helped me with the contracts of the publishing company. So I wanted to do something for you, and I thought that would be just exactly right to
Oh yes,
invite you to come to Kyoto and to do the training with your friends in Kyoto, and I would translate.
that was wonderful. Really, really, really good time. In many ways, just having a time out and being with the Yamaguchis and being with you and visiting the Mount Kurama and that wonderful city of Kyoto, that enchanting city. Wow.
Maybe we can do another session on that, recollections of that
Yes, we should.
that trip.
Definitely.
Yeah? That'd be
Yeah.
nice. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, and then I guess that Tadao also opened up to coming to the Western world, right?
Yeah. So I mentioned it before that I heard later on that they weren't really considering to turn this into a school or a bigger thing. Huh? They started the institute, but it was more out of kind of necessity. And what happened was this: yeah? After that book by Mr. Aoki came out, many of the readers tried to find out who that was, and because the esoteric circuit was very small in Japan at the time, and that we all knew each other, it was easy to find out who it was. Like me, it took me 10 minutes to find her. So when people found her, they would go to her and say, "Oh, Sensei, can you do Leiju? Can you give initiations?" She says, "Yes." "When can you do it?" And she would say, "I think about it." Now, in Kyoto, when you say, "I think about it," it means no. Yeah? But the people who were with her, they were not from Kyoto. They were Japanese, but if in Tokyo, if you say, "I think about it," it means I think about it. But in Kyoto, it doesn't. Yeah? So basically, she was telling them that I don't want to do it, but they didn't get it, luckily. So they kept coming back and calling her and said, "Sensei, have you thought about it? When are you going to start?" Yeah? And after they got pestered so many times, at some point, they, mother and son, got together and they said, "Well, these people seem to be really serious. They don't stop, so maybe we have to do, 1 or 2 or 3 groups just to
Get rid of them.
Get rid of them, so they don't bother us anymore." So that's how the institute kind of started. And then
Oh gosh.
with time, they realized that these people were really serious. They want to learn.
So Chiyoko did not teach Reiki in the decades before because she was initiated and trained as a Reiki teacher by Hayashi.
Yeah, she did teach, but due to the legal situation, because it was illegal to do healing in public, she never did seminar style teaching. So, and her opinion was this, from her long experience. She said the best way is, if somebody comes to you and they're not well, you treat them, and you treat them over long term, maybe for 1 month or 2 months or 3 months, more or less daily if possible. Slowly they get well. And then when they're really well and they look back and they realize that they've been healed, they go, "Oh, wow, what a nice thing the Reiki is. I wish I could learn that too. Would you know where I could do a training in this program? Must be in Tokyo somewhere." And she would say, "Well, actually, you could learn from me." And then they would learn from her. But it was all by private invitation. There were no groups. There was nothing like that. Yeah? And there are still, some of her old students are still around. I know them, who learn like that. And then after that book came out, then they decided to do it in public.
I see. That's interesting. And do you know since when it is allowed again in Japan to do healing arts?
It's not.
It's not?
No.
Oh, so it's worse than in Germany. Oh
Not.
gosh.
It's not.
They are all illegal over there, the Reiki practitioners?
Well, not really. It's like a gray zone. You remember before, when was it, 2003 or something, when we had that district court ruling in Germany?
Yeah, 2004, yes.
4,
It was the Bundesverfassungsgericht.
Yes. So in Japan, it's like that, like it was before 2004 in Germany. but you can get away with doing Reiki by using or not using certain words. For example, if you use the word healing, you can go to jail. Yeah? So you don't use it. When I was teaching in Japan before I met Gioco Sensei, we used to say Reiki is a relaxation technique.
Which is true.
Which is true, but it's not really true because it's not the only thing. Yeah.
Just a
So,
percentage of truth.
and then now listen to this. This is really funny. Yeah? So you know how Japanese people speak English.
Yes, I do.
Yeah, they sometimes take English words, but because in Japanese a word can never have two consonants back to back and can never end in a consonant except for the N. Yeah? They always add vowels at the end or in between words. Yeah? So the English sometimes comes out very funny. Yeah? So instead of using the word for treatment, which is chilyo, Japanese, which is a medical term that can get you into trouble, they say, we give you a Reiki tolitomento.
What is that?
Tolitomento is treatment.
No, oh please.
Treatment, TR, not possible, so you put an O in there. Tolitomento is treatment. And if you call it Reiki treatment, you can do whatever you want. But it means the same.
Funny. That's funny.
It means the same as Chilio, but if you use Chilio, you can get into trouble.
I see. I see. Wow.
Yeah, so it's like how it was in Germany in the 90s, also often having to do with the words you use or you don't use. Yeah?
So
And
same goes for shiatsu and doin and whatever?
And no, this is a really strange story that takes us back again to Japanese history after World War II. So when the US occupational forces came in, they did what they do now in the Middle East and other places. Wherever they intervene, they say, okay, now we will show you how to do it right because we know better. And they changed some things beautifully, like the jurisdictional system in Japan. They changed it. It was outdated. They changed some of the agriculture, which was also a bit outdated, but they also used the medical laws. And they said, okay, from now on, you are to use Western medical science exclusively, and you have to buy the supplies from US pharmaceutical companies. No? And they outlawed all the traditional healing arts. That means not only Reiki was small, but also shiatsu and acupuncture and chiropractic and whatever there was, Chinese medicine, everything finished. And the acupuncturists and the shiatsu practitioners, a lot of them were blind.
Oh.
Yeah, so the Japanese government used to subsidize blind people to learn acupuncture or massage.
Interesting.
Because it makes sense. Yeah, because for many reasons. Because in society, if you are really blind, there's little you can do. Yeah? But blind people become so super hypersensitive because all their energy goes elsewhere, and they make incredible body workers. The first time you get treatment from a blind acupuncturist, it's a little bit scary when he comes with his needle and you think, oh my, what's he going to do now? But once they pierce you, you go, oh my God, they're the best. I used to have one friend, an acupuncturist who was blind. Incredible, yeah? So these people were all going to lose their jobs. And
Oh no.
yeah, and they obviously also didn't go to the army, so there was a lot of people. Yeah? They didn't get killed in the war like many of the other people. So they lobbied very intensively, first in Japan, and then they got together with the famous Helen Keller in the US.
Ah, yeah, I know about her.
Amazing. And they made so much trouble for the two governments, became a political agenda. The blind
Yeah.
people, they're losing their work, this is discrimination,
Mhm.
that they said, okay, shiatsu and acupuncture, okay, everything else, no.
Ah,
Isn't that amazing? Yeah,
that's wow, that's really Japanese way.
yeah. And therefore, if you go to, let's say, to a Japanese hotel somewhere or resort, when you look on their menu, it says telephone operator, dial 0, massage, shiatsu, acupuncture, everywhere. Great.
Wow,
Yeah, but Reiki received the death sentence
I see.
at the time because they were not well organized at
Hmm.
the time. Yeah? And the shiatsu and the acupuncture people
They
were,
were organized.
yeah, and they did it, and they did beautifully.
Mhm. That's fascinating. I've heard you explain that during Second World War, the headquarters of the Uzui Reiki Gakkai was destroyed by bombs, and so they lost also lots of their organizational documents.
Yeah, apparently they lost more or less everything. Yeah,
Gosh, yeah.
the headquarters of the Usui Association was at a place called Togo Jinja, which is just across the street from the Meiji Emperor's um, shrine in the center of Tokyo.
Okay.
And that area got very heavily bombarded in World War II. Yeah? If you see the park of the Meiji shrine now with these big old ancient trees, you would think that place was saved in the war, but
Mhm.
you're wrong. It
Mhm.
was heavily bombarded and a lot of it burned down, and the Japanese government said to their people, wherever you are in Japan, if you have some big old trees, start to dig around them. We show you how to do it, and we will take them and bring them to Tokyo.
Wow.
A lot of these big trees are actually transplanted. And they made an art out of that. If you take about 2 or 3 years, you can transplant a huge tree if you know how to do it.
The
Yeah?
gardeners here would say it's impossible, but that's one of the things I really love with the Japanese. They do these magical stuff where you think, what the heck are they doing? Yeah, but they can.
Yeah, yeah. So that place got very heavily bombarded, and I don't know when, but I know the history. It was between November 44 and August 45
Yeah,
when
yeah.
that area got hit, and it burned out completely. And the only thing they have left is this one picture of Usui Sensei with the
Mm-hmm.
John Lennon glasses, then one membership a booklet with addresses of the members, and one version of the Gokai, and everything else burned down. No? Meanwhile, Tadao Sensei has collected lots of stuff. We must go visit him again someday.
Oh, yes, I would love to.
Yeah, the other time I came to the center about a year ago, and suddenly I see something. I say to him, "Where did you get this?" He said, "Oh, I found it at an auction." It was an original Gokai written by Ushida Sensei, the second
Oh,
principal of the Usui Association. About, yeah,
incredible.
incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah, so we do find documents still.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, now that the books are out, published in Japanese, sometimes people write to me or write to him.
One thing I've learned some years ago was that Uzui even was famous about 10 years before he was discovering Reiki, or Reiki discovered him, I don't know, that he was in a yearbook about famous Qigong masters in Japan, you know, with picture and description of what he's doing and so on. So Uzui had a history as a teacher.
You said that to me, I remember, but we've never been able to find it. It would be really interesting. I'd love to
I've
see
seen
it.
it, but I cannot put my hands on it right now.
Mm. I will ask Tadao Sensei again to look. The more, okay, this is our trip. The more we know, the better it is.
Well, he must have had lots of training and different healing arts as far as we know about his life. And so I think that in a way, he distilled his Reiki system out of his experience of decades of studying.
For sure. I mean, if you look in your own life, you don't suddenly have this
No.
enlightenment out of nowhere. Yeah? Your life leads up to it. It starts earlier when you're a teenager. You start to get interested in these kind of things, and you maybe come across massage or progressive muscle relaxation or meditation or anything like that, and it just adds. Yeah? And he really was a master of combining things that he had learned from different disciplines. It even says it on his memorial. It says he was interested in the world religions, in esoteric sciences, and
He was a hand reader, a palm reader, right?
this is something um, that I regret. Okay, this subject. So I never learned how to research things. This is not my. I didn't study it. I didn't study journalism or anything. So I learned by trial and error.
Well, as
This,
most of us do. Welcome to the club.
yeah, and this is one of my errors. Yeah?
Oh,
So
okay.
one time I went to the Usui Memorial, and I went with my friend Shizuko Akimoto,
Mhm.
and we saw a grave marker there. So the Japanese, they place sometimes wooden grave markers
I've seen them.
on a grave. I
Mhm.
think, if I'm not mistaken, it's on the Memorial Day or so of their death. And she's pointed one out to me, and she said, "Look, look, look! This is by a hand reading society."
Mhm.
Uh, and I said, "Oh yeah, oh very interesting," and didn't do anything about it.
Mhm.
And then left Tokyo again. If that would happen to me now, I would photograph that thing and I would do anything I can to find them. Yeah, but too late.
Too late. Mm.
Yeah, too late. This was
Maybe that will be another occasion someday.
one of the mistakes on the path. Yeah,
Well, yeah, I think
sloppy,
he must have
sloppy journalism.
No, no, it's not well, but you know, you did so much work, you still do, and I think the outcome is really fantastic. And I think that what I had understood from Uzui's life is that he traveled a lot, also because of his professions he had, and just by traveling, he must have been much more open-minded than the, let's say, common Japanese.
Yeah, what always strikes me as unusual is what it says on his memorial. It says, "Reiki will heal the world and its people."
Hmm, hmm.
Yeah, and I'm thinking, this was written on his memorial in 1927, 1 year after he passed away. That
Hmm.
memorial was erected there. And I thought, in the late 1920s, to say such a thing, yeah,
Hmm.
that's visionary. Yeah?
Well, at the
Because
time, you would have said it's hybris, but decades later, you could say it's a prophecy.
absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely, that's a prophecy. And I mean, he must have seen it. He knew it was going to happen. And we're all part of that. Thank you for that.
Well, yes, he was quite influential, so to say, even if he only for 4 years was teaching his method. But these 4 years, wow, what they started, that is tremendous.
Incredible.
Mm.
And even the numbers, um, on his memorial, it says he had more than 2,000 students. You want to calculate that in
Years,
4 years? That's a lot.
4 years, 4 years, yeah. That's a lot.
That's really a lot. So
And he had this idea, meeting his students regularly and teaching them ongoing, so to say, not in classes like we do in the Western world.
no, they had a dojo, a training center, like a place where you do martial arts or body work or something. Yeah? So it wasn't also Hayashi Sensei the same. Yeah? It wasn't a hospital that they had,
Mhm.
but a training center where people could come again and again and again to learn, like you learn karate or judo or
Mhm,
something.
mhm. Makes much sense, and I think this is a beautiful way to study Reiki.
Yeah, and they had like a membership, like a monthly membership. I remember the Usui Association in nine in the late mid late 90s. Their membership fee was 10,000 yen, which was then about $100 per
Oh,
month.
a month.
Per month.
Okay.
Yeah. So, and you paid your $100 every month, and that enabled you to go to 4 meetings,
Mhm.
like General Assembly
Yeah.
meetings. Yeah? So, $25 for each meeting in which you would receive a leiju
Mhm.
and practice together. So it was not expensive. Huh?
Mhm. Mhm.
The membership. I like that. I think that's a nice system. Yeah?
Mhm.
Like yoga class or
Mhm.
language class or something, more like that. And very clearly a pointer that Reiki is not something that you do and you tick off, but that it's really a lifelong commitment, or well, a commitment as long as you enjoy it.
Yeah, yeah. That's what I really like to do. It's walking the Reiki path instead of just visiting a class and another class and then that's it. And then you go on, you do, I don't know, whatever kind of other arts, which are wonderful. As you mentioned before, I love to learn healing arts, but I think it centers around Reiki because it that is a fundament for all these things. It relates to all these things, and I could not imagine uh, not working with the five principles, not working with a full body treatment and these kind of things, because it gives me so much.
Yeah, I'm the same. For me, it's also the foundation of everything I do. Yeah, and everything else is
Mm.
just how to say it. Well, it just fits.
It fits wonderfully.
It fits with everything. But basically, Reiki is my foundation work,
Mm.
and I love that. Yeah? And I know that people get touched very beautifully, very deeply, and that it will change their life. And I, before I practiced Reiki, I didn't really see people change,
Right.
and now I see people change, and
Yeah.
that's a good
That's
sign.
really good. That's really good. It just came to my mind. Um, Uzuiwa was a very well-traveled person and open-minded, and Tayashi was too, because he was this commander of one of the schooling ships of the Navy. And wasn't it that there were many Navy officers in the Uzui Gakai?
Yeah, there was a historical reason for that, which was that Usui Sensei had a number of jobs. It says on his memorial that he had a life of many ups and downs, great success and great failure.
Don't we all? And he also was going into the Navy.
So he had wait. Let's take 10 seconds. No? So he said it states on his memorial he had a life of many ups and downs, great success, great failure, and he even went bankrupt one day. So if any of you listening have gone through the similar thing I have, you're in good company. Yeah? So one of the last jobs he had was he was the private secretary of a then very famous Japanese politician, Count Shinpei Goto.
Mm-hmm.
And this Mr. Goto, at the end of his career, was the foreign minister.
Mm-hmm.
And with him, Usui Sensei traveled. And when they traveled on board of Navy vessels, of course. They didn't fly. Huh?
Cool.
So there he met lots of high-ranking Army and Navy personnel, and with those people he connected afterwards. They became his first students. That's why.
That's the reason.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and of course, the other reason must be that in Japan, and we know in Germany was the same, Army, Navy, that was the most desirable job and the job that the elite had. Huh?
Mm-hmm. I see. Yeah.
And, and these people are more likely to be frustrated, huh, with their lives.
Yes, and also to be more open-minded because they are
Yeah,
well traveled.
yeah,
They
yeah.
were seeing the world. They did not just live in their home village or hometown in Japan, you know.
Yes, yes.
So I
Yeah,
think this is a very interesting fundamental for um, a method like Reiki, that it was built on the shoulders of people who were well traveled and much more open-minded than the common Japanese person. And well, Reiki started to travel.
yeah, it's built in, huh, maybe.
It's built in. It's built in. Okay, Ajava, I think for today we covered even more than we planned, and I'm looking much forward to go on next time.
Nice. I will see you soon.
Okay.
Thank you. Thank you. Bye.
Bye bye.
Take the butterfly and